Okay, hi guys. So today we're going to be reviewing and learning more about the Pythagorean theorem. So in the last class we learned how to solve for the missing hypotenuse using the Pythagorean theorem, but now we're actually going to be learning about how we can find a missing leg. So we're going to review a little bit and then kind of go for some ways to solve the other missing sides. So let's take a look at number one first. We'll review really quick. Okay, so here we have number one. You'll notice that we have a leg of 9 and another leg of 12, and our hypotenuse is x. So we want to see how we can solve it. Now I actually, we'll review it, redrew the triangles to make it a little bit easier so you can kind of review to see what we did, and we'll do the last step together. So you'll notice we had a squared plus b squared equals c squared, which is the Pythagorean theorem. That's what we always want to use. That's for solving any missing side of a right triangle. So I plugged in 9 squared plus 12 squared equals c squared, and we ended up with 81 plus 144 equals c squared. And if we add those up, we get 225. But the c is not by itself, so we need to take the square root to get c totally by itself. So c by itself would be 15. So that means our missing side, our hypotenuse, would be 15. Okay, now let's have you try number two. So number two looks like this. Okay, so I redrew number two for you, so it's a little different. You could see it there. So let's see if we can solve that. So once again, we can use a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So we should have 10 squared plus 24 squared equals c squared. So that's 100 plus 576 equals c squared. So it's just a lot of math here. And we have 676 equals c squared. Once again, last step is square root. So the square root of 676 would be c is equal to 26. So that means our hypotenuse here is 26. Okay? Let's take a look at the next problem. Number 3, so why don't you try solving for x? Okay, so let's take a look. I redrew it again, so it's all facing the same direction. So we could do a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So we should have 3 squared plus 7 squared equals c squared. So we have 9 plus 49 equals c squared. We could add it up. 58 equals c squared. We take the square root of 58, and our missing hypotenuse, now we actually don't have a whole number for this one, should be 7.6. I rounded to the nearest tenth just to make it a little bit easier for today. Okay, let's take a look at number 4. Now number 4, you'll notice, is a little different, okay, because being that this is our right angle, that makes 10 our hypotenuse. Now we're actually not missing the hypotenuse there, we're missing one of the legs. So let's see how we can do that. So I'm gonna rotate number 4 for us just so we can kind of see it a little bit better. Like we said, 10 was our hypotenuse. So let's see how we could go about solving that. It's actually pretty easy. We wanna use the formula once again, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Okay, so we have one leg of 6. We have 6 squared. We don't know what b squared is yet, but we know that the hypotenuse would be 10 squared. And we can kind of solve for our variable once again. So we have 36 plus b squared equals 100. Okay, then let's see. We want to get b squared by itself. So we want to move everything to the other side again. So we could subtract 36 going back to solving for a variable. And we have b squared, and we do 100 minus 36, which would be 64. And once again, the last step would be to take the square root. So the square root of 64, in this case, would be 8. So that means our missing side would be 8. And that shows what we always knew, that the hypotenuse is the longest side. Okay, so our missing side would be 8 in that case. Okay, let's take a look at number 5. Okay, we'll do one more as an example, then I'll have you try some on your own. So number 5, you'll notice, is another missing leg. Okay, so let's see how we could solve that together. So here's number 5. I redrew it for us, so it's a little bigger. Okay, so we have a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Okay, so let's see if we could solve that. Let's see. 6 squared plus b squared equals 24 squared. Now it doesn't matter if you're missing a squared or b squared because it means the same thing. So we have 36 plus b squared equals 576. We could subtract that 36 to get b squared by itself. So now we have b squared is equal to 540. And do you remember what the last step should be? It should be to take the square root to get our variable by itself. So b should be equal to 23.2. We take the square root of 540. Okay, 23.2. Okay, now let's have you try some on your own. So I want you to try number 6. I'll zoom in a little bit. Here's number 6. Okay, try number 6. Okay, number 6. Let's try, let me zoom out a little bit just so we can see it better over here. I redrew it for us. Okay, so let's, whoops, there we go. Let's move it over. Let's go about solving it. So we should have a missing hypotenuse. We're not missing a leg this time. We're missing a hypotenuse once again, so we know how to solve that. So we have a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So some easy math. 1 squared plus 1 squared equals c squared. 1 plus 1 equals c squared. Ooh, easy math. 2 equals c squared. We want to take the square root of 2, and the square root of 2 is actually equal to 1.4. Okay, so just like what we know, the hypotenuse, which is the longest side, is 1.4. Okay, which is what it shows here. 1.4. Okay, let's take a look at number 7. Let me zoom up so you can see it. Okay, let's see how we could go about solving for number 7. I redrew it for us so we could see. Now, we're not missing the hypotenuse because here's our hypotenuse. We are missing one of the legs. So let's see, we have a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So we have 8 squared plus b squared equals 21 squared. 64 plus b squared equals, let's see, what did I have here? Equals 441. So we could subtract that 64, and we should get b squared is equal to 377. Once again, we take the square root, and b would be equal, for number 7, to 19.4. Okay, 19.4. We're rounding to the nearest tenth. Okay, let's take a look at number 8. Why don't you try solving for number 8? All right, so let's take a look at number 8 together. So I redrew it just so it's facing the same direction for an easier viewing. So we have a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So we have 24 squared plus b squared equals 30 squared. So we have larger numbers, but we have calculators, so that should be okay. Okay, so we have 576 plus b squared equals 900. We subtract the 576 from the 900 to get b squared by itself. And when we subtract that for number 8, we should get 324. So we take the square root of 324, and we should get that b is equal to 18. Okay, let's try number 9. Now number 9 is actually 2 different ones. Okay, so what I want you to do is kind of imagine as had to divide it into one triangle here, and then we have another triangle on the other side. Okay, so let's take a look at how we could solve that. Okay, now I redrew, oops, let me zoom out a little bit, sorry. I redrew number 9 into the 2 different triangles in that shape. So we could just solve for each. So if you solve for each, we should get 5 squared plus 9 squared equals x squared. So we have 25 plus 81 equals x squared. So if we add those up, we should get 106 is equal to x squared. We take the square root, and x should be equal to 10.3. Okay, let's try solving for y. Okay, so to solve for y, once again we are solving for the hypotenuse. So we have 5 squared plus 3 squared equals c squared. So 25 plus 9 equals c squared. So if we add it, we get 34 equals c squared. We take the square root, and we should get c is equal to 5.8. All right, we're going to try one more. It's actually a word problem. Okay, so it says a ladder is leaning against the side of a 10-meter house. If the base of the ladder is 3 meters away from the house, how tall is the ladder? Draw a diagram to show all work. Okay, so let's take a look. So I actually drew the picture that it was describing, and you'll notice that it actually forms a right triangle. So if you want to just draw the right triangle, we could see here that the height would be 10, it's 3 meters away from the house, and we want to know how tall is that ladder. Okay, so we're missing hypotenuse. We could do 10 squared plus 3 squared equals c squared. So we have 100 plus 9 equals c squared. So we want to do 109 equals c squared. So we take the square root, and the square root of 109 means that the ladder should be 10.4 feet. Okay, so I hope you were able to solve it. I hope it makes a little bit more sense how to solve for a leg of a Pythagorean theorem. All right, good job today.